know, these things sometimes have a little bit of a mind of their own, and for every little jog this way or that way makes all the difference in the world and where it may eventually even wind up. And Carl Parker, you know as well as I do, the longer parts of this stay over water, we know eventually it goes into the northern Gulf and comes on shore, but the longer the wind field could stay up. So for cities like Birmingham, Atlanta, Montgomery, Macon, your wind potential goes up with the longer term that stays offshore. Parker, you know as well as I do.
That's absolutely right, Jim. And so, you know, we've been looking at a model showing the core of the storm, showing it partially onshore and partially offshore, so still drawing energy from very warm water in the Gulf of Mexico. But yes, if the core were to stay a little more offshore, here's the model forecast showing you this RPM model. You see it's right along the coast there. That's Monday morning. If it's just a little bit farther offshore, then it stays stronger and longer. And as it stands, Jim, we're going to be talking about winds that will be very strong coming up into South Georgia. There we go into Monday afternoon. And in fact, I don't know if you saw this, Jim, but looking at the European model, which, you know, by the way, has done a real bang-up job. This has been the best model of all, hands down, in this event. And when you look at the European model, Jim, we're going to be talking about forecast in North Georgia. It's actually coming up into South Georgia, 70 and 80, Monday after 90 miles per hour in North Georgia, in the Atlanta metro area. So this could be a formidable storm. We won't see sustained winds anywhere near that event. Where we get some heavier bands of storms with all that strong wind, all that velocity and momentum, along with being transferred down to the ground. And we could be talking about winds that could easily knock down a lot of trees and cause a lot of power outages across much of the state of Georgia and also into South Carolina. Winds anywhere near that event. Where we get some heavier
so think of Opal, and maybe even worse if that comes to fruition. Carl, here's, I don't know if you see this, I'm going to have to say for zoom in on. This is mountain gauge. Okay, this is the forecast wind by the European model, with it still coming into Naples, Fort Myers, for the Tampa area. These are forecast gusts, so these aren't going to be sustained with forecast gusts. And you can see well over. Carl, here's, I don't know if you see this, I'm going to say for 125, just a tremendous wind here in the Tampa Bay area. And that is some wind that they haven't seen in ages. But that's incredible. And you're taking all along West Coast Florida. So this is, if this verifies, this is a massive amount of damage. A massive amount of damage. And if you live in a mobile home, you just live in the same structure, you could easily become Bay area. And that is some wind that they haven't seen. I'm not saying that's going to verify, okay? But that's what we're seeing from some of the guys. Whether this is wind gusts, even toward Tampa Bay. So this is massive amount of that with the European comes in around the edges of Fort Myers. So even with it getting a chance to wind down a little bit, we're still seeing wind gusts. So this is so good. And what I don't want people to do, some of the guys, because they've gone from 150 to 130, even toward Tampa Bay. So worry about it now. You're still in the Cat 4 range, and you're still up there in severe wind and like if the picture you paint for Birmingham and Atlanta and northern Georgia comes to fruition, and what I don't want people to do, I mean, wow, I can't even imagine dollar value for this. I really can't. I can't. Worry about it now.
Yeah, this is going to be a devastating storm. You know, for so long we were thinking about the fact that it's not moving to the eastern part of the state, that core of the storm, and now it appears solidly. All the model guidance is now converging on this point about the idea of the core of the storm coming right across the southwest part of the state, and it's so different as compared to recent storms. You look at Charlie and had a very small, what's called a radius of maximum wind. It was only about 7 miles, that area of strongest wind, whereas the average is closer to 25 to 30 miles, and in this case it's even larger than that. The hurricane force winds extending out 70 miles. So you're talking about this swath of, you look at Charlie, and starting there in the Keys, coming up to Naples, and right up to Fort Myers, into Port Charlotte, into Sarasota, into Bradenton, into Tampa, St. Pete, and up into the central part of the state, and then right up to 75, and that's not going to slow down. These systems have a lot of what is called inertial stability, and they don't just stop once they get over land, even though you remove that fuel source. It takes a long time for that to happen, and oftentimes you see the wind field actually expanding, and then the gusts get stronger even as that sustained wind starts to come down. Not going to slow down. These systems have a lot of.
And Carl, to that point, we've got such a deep low pressure pressure here as we get it up to the north. Now you've got this large gradient wind field that, like you said, is expanding. So even if we don't hit 90 in Atlanta or Birmingham or in northern Georgia, perhaps as far north as Huntsville, Chattanooga, and even if you get several hours, we've got 55, 60 here, that wind's going to come in as we get direction up in the north. Now you've got this large tree. We saw a lot of that with Old City. There was a tremendous amount of wind even as the storm in Atlanta. The other thing too, Cam, if this storm decides to ramp up and then come in, the farther north and west it comes in, the longer it's going to take to come down. So I think it's a very real possibility to picture you paint for parts of Alabama and Georgia in terms of the potential wind damage there. And really what is going to be Cat 1, maybe even Cat 2 winds if this storm decides to ramp up. And then come in, the farther north and west it comes in, the longer it's going to take to come down. So I think it's a very real possibility to picture you paint for parts of Alabama and
serious storm for a large part of the southeast. Now, another thing I wanted to mention, Jim, is the surge potential here, because the surge potential is so high there along the west coast of Florida. What we're looking at here is the continental shelf, and you can see this very shallow shelf that extends well offshore. And I'm sure you know this, Jim. If you go to the beach there in Southwest Florida, you can walk out, a football field, a couple of football fields, and the water is still not over your head. And so it just allows the water to be piled up that much more easily. And then another thing that we see are something called coastally trapped Kelvin waves, where you get these waves that emanate from the circulation and come out and towards the coast. And that also raises that surge potential. We've seen that with a number of storms coming into the west coast of Florida. So that's going to mean that we may see an even higher surge than what is forecast right now. You've got this tremendous surge here in Southwest Florida right now, 5 to 10 feet from Miami down through the Keys, 8 to 12 there into Naples and Marco Island. You look at Marco Island, that means that those beautiful homes there are just going to be completely inundated by high water, along with the wave action that comes with that. And then you've got 5 to 8 as you get up towards Sarasota and Bradenton. And right now we've got 3 to 5 in Tampa. But again, you've got that really shallow shelf. And with the storm being this powerful and taking that track that's right along the coast, that's going to drive an awful lot of water in there. And some of the surge modeling suggesting that it may be higher than that in Tampa and St. Pete. So this could really be significant surge there, Jim, getting up into the bay there and right along the coast.
Carl, we really haven't seen a storm of this size with this, if you will, Donna Charlie type trajectory in years.
That's right.
So, areas that haven't been tested are going to be tested in through here. And what I think makes the recovery so difficult, and I know that I'm asking for patience even before the event happens, but you can't really just put the recovery effort in harm's way. You have to make sure that's out of harm's way, and then you can get in. But if we have the type of destruction that we're going to see, remember, you've got to remove the trees, you've got to remove the old poles, you've got to get the lines down, and then you can start putting it up. And granted, we have literally armies of that waiting to come in, but it may take some time. And already before this event starts, I need to ask for all y'all's patience, especially ones that have had to evacuate and know that you're in potentially the worst of this. A little bit of a breather here, certainly on the east side with this western shift, but because it's so big, that's why we still have hurricane warnings all the way up to Cape Canaveral, because we're going to get hurricane conditions. Will they be eye wall conditions on the east side? Probably not. But still, 80, 90 miles an hour, gust to 100 can do a lot of damage. And especially because it's so big, Carl, it's going to take a while for those gusts to wind down.
Yeah, that's exactly right, Jim. And we've seen this wholesale shift in the modeling here farther along towards the west. So again, that's bringing the most dangerous core of the storm up across the Keys. This is going to be devastating in the Keys and then into Southwest Florida. And we see less effects along the east coast of Florida, but certainly it's not going to be no effects. And this is a look at the size of the storm. So the hurricane force winds extending out from the center 70 miles. That's much larger than average. Tropical storm force winds extending out 200 miles from the center. They're already beginning to move into the Keys and into far South Florida right now. By late tonight, that's when those hurricane force winds start to come into the Keys and then into early tomorrow, and certainly by the middle of the day tomorrow, we see those hurricane force winds overspreading a good part of southwest Florida, getting up into Naples and into Marco Island. So notice here, this area of orange, that's the hurricane force wind gusts. So it may be that you don't see hurricane force winds sustained in all of South Florida, but rather you see winds gusting to hurricane force. But because it is going to be a prolonged period, because it's going to go on for hours and hours and hours, going to pound all of these structures and the trees, it's still going to cause a lot of damage, and the greater damage potential is going to be farther to the west. As you know, South Florida has been pushing west for a very, very long period of time, and the closer that you are to the glades, the greater the wind potential is going to be there. Looking at the model forecast, this is one of our RPM models. One of our high-resolution models, I should say, RPM model, showing that core of the storm really coming up and across southwest Florida. That's into tomorrow morning. And so the tropical storm force winds well preceding that. They're going to be coming in late tonight and overnight. Yeah, Jim, go ahead.
Carl, yeah, I don't know if you showed this yet, but this is from Levi Cowan's site. This guy is a tremendous meteorologist, Tropical Tidbits. This is a look at the 12Z models, okay? They haven't shown much of a westward shift, so maybe, guys, just maybe we can have a little confidence in the fact that this may not be going farther west. But still, this paints pretty much the same picture as the Hurricane Center's center point of their track. Again, coming into southwest Florida, just skirting along up through Port Charlotte, up through Tampa, up through Cedar Key, and then driving its way up across Georgia into northern Alabama. All right, guys, we've got a press conference from Governor Rick Scott. We are going to join in progress. Joining us this morning, I actually got a chance to talk to him. He's in Tallahassee this morning, or he was when I was talking to him. He's pretty pleased with how things are going, okay? And he's very worried, obviously, about people, especially in the surge. Let's join him.
Management officials here in Sarasota County. The storm's here. Hurricane Irma is now impacting our state. Southeast Florida is already experiencing tropical storm force winds, and nearly 25,000 people have already lost power. Hurricane Irma is beginning to batter the Florida Keys with dangerous winds and continues to remain a catastrophic and life-threatening Category 4 storm with winds of 130 miles per hour. This is a deadly storm, and our state has never seen anything like it. Millions of Floridians will see major hurricane impacts with deadly storm surge and life-threatening winds. The threat of significant storm surge flooding along the entire west coast of Florida has increased. And 6 to 12 feet, think about that, 6 to 12 feet of impacts above ground level is now probable. 6 to 12 feet, this will cover your house. If you've ever watched how storm surge works, it flows in fast, very fast, then it flows out. You will not survive all this storm surge. This is a life-threatening situation. If you have been ordered to evacuate, you need to leave now. Do not wait. Evacuate. Not tonight, not in an hour. You need to go right now. If you're in an evacuation zone, leave. Evacuations are in place across the state. More than 5.6 million Floridians have been ordered to evacuate. You need to listen to local evacuation orders. If you live in an evacuation zone in southwest Florida, you need to be on the road by noon or find the nearest shelter to avoid life-threatening weather. It's going to go faster than you are. These winds are coming. If you're in this area and you're planning to leave and have not done so by noon, do not get on the road. If you're on the west coast trying to go north, I mean, you're going to have a hard time getting out. Just remember this, once the storm starts, law enforcement cannot save you. I'm a dad, I'm a grandfather. I love my family more than anything. I cannot imagine life without them. Do not put your life or your family's life at risk. Right now is the time to do the right thing for you, yourself, and your family. School buses are aiding in evacuations. Please take advantage of this service. If you need to leave and for whatever reason you're unable to leave and you need help, whether it's fuel, whatever the issue is, call 1-800-342-3557, and we will do everything possible to get you out. 1-800-342-3557. Protecting life is our absolute top priority. There will be no resource or expense spared to protect life. Our goal is to protect every person in this state's life. I urge everyone to check on your neighbors, your family, and your friends. If you know somebody who is not evacuating and should, contact them and make sure they have a plan to get out. We are being very aggressive in our preparation for this storm, and my hope is every Floridian should take this seriously and be aggressive to protect their family. Your house can be replaced, your possessions can be replaced, your life cannot be replaced, and your family cannot be replaced. Shelters. We have been working with counties to ensure there are enough shelters. Currently, there are more than 260 shelters open across the state in every county in the state. At least 70 more shelters are opening today. More than 50,000 Floridians have taken shelter, and there's still room for more. If you have a building, emergency individuals ask you to open a shelter, please comply. It's going to save people's lives. This is so important to families seeking safety. Everyone in Florida needs to find a safe place to go. Traffic. We still see some traffic, but overall evacuation routes are moving. Evacuations are not meant to be convenient, they're meant to be safe. I'm glad so many are taking this seriously and driving to a safe place. But if you don't need to be on the road, don't be on the road. We increased the number of troopers on Florida roadways to continue moving traffic along. You can check real-time traffic information evacuation routes at fl511.com. You don't have to evacuate out of the state. You don't have to evacuate even out of your county. You don't have to go hundreds of miles. We have shelters in every county other than Monroe, and those have evacuated to Miami-Dade. So shelters are available in every county. Again, if there's any reason you can't get out, any reason at all, fuel, whatever it is, 800-342-3557. We will do everything we can, but we can't do it once the storm starts. Fuel. We're working aggressively to keep our gas stations open and filled. But this won't last much longer because it's going to be unsafe to be on the roads. We're doing everything we can to get as much fuel into the state as we can. While all the fuel ports in Florida are now closed for safety as Irma impacts our state, so our ports are closed, so we're not getting any more tankers in. Following the storm, state troopers will resume escorting fuel supply trucks directly to gas stations in your community. So we'll get, after the storm, as soon as we can get fuel trucks moving, we'll do it again. I waived Florida's motor vehicle import tax for 5 days to help bring more fuel to our state for storm response and recovery. We all know fuel is important, and we're going to absolutely devote every state resource we can to get the fuel here. Law enforcement. Florida's prepared. We have great first responders. We have great law enforcement. Every single Florida Guardsman has already been deployed that we can deploy, and they're prepared to respond to this storm. We have so many members of law enforcement and our Guardsmen that are putting their lives at risk to help Floridians get to a safe place, and they will not stop until it's no longer safe for them. I can't thank them enough. Utilities. Our providers are actively pre-positioning resources throughout the state and in neighboring states. We know how important power is, and we're going to be very aggressive at getting power back on. I want to be clear. We are under a state of emergency. Employees who perform vital services, including healthcare staff, we need you to be there to help your community. We need 1,000 volunteer nurses to help at our special needs shelters. If you can volunteer, let me give you a website. BPRCHD preparedness at flhealth.gov. Again, we need more nurses. All available nurses, if you'll please respond to BPRCHD preparedness at flhealth.gov. We've already received thousands of replies. This is great news, and we're actively working with all of these individuals to support this need. So many people across this country have called to offer their prayers and support. I want to thank the governors of other states that provided every resource we've asked for. I know the entire country is behind us. I've been talking to the White House almost every day. I've talked to President Trump. He has promised all federal resources. I talked to Brock Long, who runs FEMA, this morning, and he's guaranteed us all federal resources. We have the country's best first responders right here in Florida. But if you're in an evacuation zone, I hope you will go right this minute. Get to a safe place. This is a catastrophic storm. We've never seen this before. It's bigger than our state. Florida is tough. Florida is resilient. Florida is unbreakable. Let's all stay together and help each other. We are an amazing melting pot of wonderful people. This is a great state, and we're going to come out of this very strong. Este huracán es muy peligroso. Su vida es lo más importante. Cada familia debe de tener un plan. Por favor, salgan si están en zona de evacuación. Para más información, por favor, llamen.
All right, we were just listening to Florida Governor Rick Scott there talking about all the preparations that are underway in his state. We have certainly seen some changes in the forecast in the last day here as the storm has been working farther along towards the west, and so now the direct impacts far more likely to affect the western part of the state as opposed to the eastern part of the state, which is not to say that South Florida and the East Coast are not going to get significant effects. Certainly we're going to see winds gusting to hurricane force. We will also see a storm surge of 5 to 10 feet across South Florida and the Keys. That is an enormous storm surge in those areas. You've got to be away from the coast. And here's the latest on the storm from the Hurricane Center. Now a 130 mile per hour Cat 4. And so the wind came down 20 miles as of the last advisory as compared to the one before that. And that's because of this interaction with land. And you can see that there has been some degradation in the cloud there in the western semicircle. So there certainly has been some weakening. But don't be fooled by that, because we expect that once it gets back out over the open water, it's got every possibility of becoming once again a much stronger storm, a strong Category 4 or even a Category 5 storm. And let's go back out to Jim Cantore. He's been in Miami. And Jim, this is, as mentioned, a better scenario for South Florida, but it's certainly not a good scenario for South Florida.
No, it's not. I mean, until this thing, weakens more, it's just not. Nobody's going to win here. It's just too big, it's too strong, and it has the chance of regaining strength. Guys, I want to show you some pictures out of Fort Myers, okay? One of the things that I want you to take away from Governor Scott's press conference was the fact that he says he's got shelters in every county but Monroe, which is the Keys. It makes sense. He wants everybody out of there, period. But every county, and you can see here in Fort Myers, there are people that are actually waiting to get into a shelter. And remember what's happened here in 24 hours. We've seen the models go from a landfall south of Miami to one that could be south of Naples over Marco Island. So, so the surge potential has increased, as Carl and I have been talking about on the west side, but you've also got the structural damage potential that has increased. You've got homes that are older. You've got a lot of mobile homes and manufactured homes in parts of the west side, including the Tampa Bay area. So this is a big deal. We were talking about some of the winds could be gusting 100, 125 miles per hour, especially if this thing ramps back up. That's the forecast for Tampa Bay. All right, maybe as high as 150 down in Naples, Fort Myers, Marco Island. So this is a huge deal. Just to kind of reiterate, guys, again, we just heard from Governor Scott. If you do, right out of the gate, if you don't evacuate when you're asked to do so, you're putting yourself and your family in harm's way. FL511.com. If you're evacuating, check that website out. It's going to give you real-time traffic info. If there's traffic here, if you have to go and access another route, you can do that. Gas has been brought in, but the ports are closed now. The ports are closed. They're not going to be getting any more gas, and soon, probably by nightfall tonight at the latest, all the gas stations are going to be shutting down, because they too have to get out of harm's way. All right, so that if you're going to get the gas, you're going to move, you got to do it now. You got to do it today. We're already seeing some of these bands go across the state over toward Naples, and also as far north as Palm Bay. We've gotten tropical storm wind gusts already. So this is incredible, guys. Again, shelters in every county, as I mentioned in through here. The volunteer nurses situation, and the entire country is behind Florida right now, including the leadership at the top, President Trump. Carl, good to hear that. I think the leadership has been very, very good from top to bottom. Over to you.
That's right, Jim, and wanted to show you the advisories that are now out. Hurricane warnings now through all of South Florida, the southwest part of the state, up into Tampa and Daytona Beach, and then hurricane watches for the northern part of the state, Gainesville, Ocala, and also into South Georgia. Now, does that mean you've got a different level of threat in those areas? Absolutely not. It does not mean that. What it means is that this is a time-based thing. So this area is where hurricane force winds are expected in 36 hours.
Early. You know, these things sometimes have a little bit of a mind of their own, and for every little jog this way or that way makes all the difference in the world and where it may eventually even wind up. And Carl Parker, you know as well as I do, the longer parts of this stay over water, we know eventually it goes into the northern Gulf and comes on shore, but the longer the wind field could stay up. So for cities like Birmingham, Atlanta, Montgomery, Macon, your wind potential goes up with the longer term that stays offshore. Parker, you know as well as I do.
That's absolutely right, Jim. And so, we've been looking at a model showing the core of the storm, showing it partially onshore and partially offshore, so still drawing energy from very warm water in the Gulf of Mexico. But yes, if the core were to stay a little more offshore, here's the model forecast showing you this RPM model. You see it's right along the coast there. That's Monday morning. If it's just farther offshore, then it stays stronger and longer. And as it stands, Jim, we're going to be talking about winds that will be very strong coming up into South Georgia. There we go into Monday afternoon. And in fact, I don't know if you saw this, Jim, but looking at the European model, which, by the way, has done a real bang-up job. This has been the best model of all, hands down, in this event. And when you look at the European model, wind gust forecast in North Georgia, it's actually showing up into South Georgia 70 and 80, Monday afternoon 90 miles per hour. In North Georgia, in the Atlanta metro area. So this could be a formidable storm. We won't see sustained winds anywhere near that event. Where we could see heavier bands of storms with all that strong wind and all that velocity and momentum along with being transferred down to the ground. And we're talking about winds that could easily knock down a lot of trees and cause a lot of power outages across much of the state of Georgia and also into South Carolina. Winds anywhere near that event. Where we could see heavier
so think of Opal. And maybe even worse if that comes to fruition. Carl, here's these things sometimes have a little bit of a mind of their own, and for every little jog this way or that way makes all the difference in the world and where it may eventually even wind up. And Carl Parker, you know as well as I do, the longer parts of this stay over water. We know eventually it goes into the northern Gulf and comes on shore, but the longer the wind field could stay up. So for cities like Birmingham, Atlanta, Montgomery, Macon, your wind potential goes up with the longer term that stays offshore. Parker, you know that makes sense as well as I do.
That's absolutely right, Jim. And so, we've been looking at a model showing the core of the storm, showing it partially onshore and partially offshore, so still drawing energy from very warm water in the Gulf of Mexico. But yes, if the core were to stay a little more offshore, here's the model forecast showing you this RPM model. You see it's right along the coast there. That's Monday morning. If it's just
The impacts here are imminent in the state of Florida.
This is a lot of rain, a lot of wind, but what's troubled me all week was a storm surge.
This hurricane coming, I am not going to stay here.
Winds are only going to get stronger from here on out.
If a hurricane comes here and takes this town out, it's going to be a financial disaster.
All right, guys, you are listening and seeing the first bands of Irma work their way through the Keys, and believe it or not, this was about 3.5, 4 hours ago, okay? So the storm is still kind of sitting there flirting with Cuba. It will do that potentially for another 6 hours or so and then make that turn. Once it does, there is certainly a chance it could strengthen back toward a Category 5. I wish we could say that that's not the case, but we can't. We have to tell you that there is a chance for further strengthening. This structure of this storm is so well intact. Even with it flirting with Cuba, it really hasn't taken it down all that much. 150 to 130 may seem like a lot, but we still have a Cat 4 here. We're still looking down the barrel at the strongest hurricane since Donna in 1960 to come across the Keys. All right, so what do we have here in downtown Miami? Besides a ghost town, you can see that the wind out of the northeast is blowing the palms back away. Pretty much a steady wind here. Occasionally when we do get some rain squalls, steady wind here. Occasionally when we do get some rain squalls and some thunderstorms, those winds do kick up a little bit more, maybe gusting toward 40. Winds a lot stronger at the beaches. Remember, I'm in downtown. So you've got the river, you got the bay, and then you have the beaches, which are taking the big wave action and some of the stronger winds because there's no friction. The other thing here is I'm right across from the port of Miami. Yesterday we had a huge Royal Caribbean cruise ship out here, at a Carnival one as well off to the left near the bridge. But the both of them are gone. But I know the Royal Caribbean, I think it was Enchantment, took their employees out. And so they just went right out of the way. They just got out even east of the Bahamas. They're going to sit there and ride this thing out. And then they'll come back into port and let everybody get back home. But a great idea, certainly, just to A, get the ship out of harm's way, and B, get their employees out as well, give them a chance to evacuate on their home turf, if you will, on the place that they actually go toward work. All right, let's talk about what's going on with Irma. We are at 9:55, so we're an hour or so, if you will, from the next advisory. Carl Parker, senior meteorologist at the Weather Channel. Let's talk about what you're seeing, Carl, in terms of the satellite, maybe the radar out of Cuba. Is there anything that you see weakening, strengthening at this point?
Well, certainly we've been seeing a lot of degradation in the cloud there in the western half of the storm. So you're seeing that interaction with land. The eye is not as well defined. Could be right along the coast there for another 6 hours. It could be as long as 12 hours, maybe even longer, depending on some of the model guidance there. And then it's going to begin to make that turn. Now, the longer it spends close to the coast, you've got more chance of the intensity coming down. But as you mentioned, this thing has got a lot of what is called inertial stability. It's been going and going for a very, very long time. It's not easily going to be slowed down. If it does continue to weaken at all, it's going to be a very gradual and very subtle thing for the most part. It's certainly not going to really lose a lot of intensity anytime soon. And the big change that we saw here in the last day or so was this shift even farther to the west in the model guidance, taking it right up and along the west coast of Florida. Now, because it is such a large storm, we're talking about the core of the storm affecting the west coast of Florida. So the very worst of the impacts there along the west coast. But by no means does that mean that we're not going to see impact along the east coast. In fact, hurricane force wind gusts entirely likely across much of South Florida and the eastern part of Florida. And as the storm comes back out over the open water, it's got this long stretch here. You've got 90 miles of distance between Cuba and Key West right in there. So you've got that, and then you've got probably another 90 miles if it stayed right down the center line, or even more if it's farther west. And it is possible that the storm might move even farther to the west. The best guess right now is that it's going to come into the coast, but because of all this time out over the open water and exceptionally warm water with temperatures in the upper 80s and lower 90s, that's why we think it's entirely possible that the storm gets back up to strong Category 4, possibly Category 5, and this is why the impact is going to be devastating along the coast there. And obviously, if it's farther to the west, that's going to even raise the stakes for in terms of storm surge there in a lot of low-lying terrain along the west coast of Florida. And then beyond that, the storm comes up into northern Florida, hurricane force winds getting all the way up here into South Georgia, and hurricane force wind gusts will make it as far north as northern Georgia. So this is going to bring a significant impact to Atlanta as well. And that's going to be starting late Monday and into early Tuesday. Winds now gusting to 39 in Marathon. We've had wind gusts into the middle 60s in the Middle Keys already. So that tropical storm force wind is now coming into the Keys, and extreme South Florida will be moving in this evening into areas, say, around Palm Beach County and over into Naples. So you've got to be in your shelter by that time. It's going to be too late to do anything. And also, public officials are going to be recalled at that point. So you're not going to have the same level of access to police and firefighters. And then here you go into Sunday morning, and you see that strong wind, that tropical storm force wind getting up into the vicinity of Bradenton, Sarasota, as well as Lakeland and Titusville there, and then continuing farther north into the evening. Now, here's a look at the model forecast. And so tomorrow morning, that most dangerous part of the storm, that eye wall, devastating the Keys. One of the strongest hits that we've seen in a very long time, could well be since Donna in 1960. Our coverage continues right now.
A storm surge of 5 to 10 feet could wipe out our low-lying areas.
Well, very concerned.
The Weather Channel started talking about this storm far enough out. They heeded our warning.
And we have our continuing coverage of Hurricane Irma. I'm meteorologist Jen Carfagno. I am now live in Savannah, Georgia, where we are under a mandatory evacuation that began this morning, and contraflow began this morning, as well as residents and visitors now are streaming out of Chatham County. So let's talk about this powerful Hurricane Irma, which is a Category 4 right now as it brushes the northern coast of Cuba, moving over the Florida Straits. We are going to watch these next 12 hours very closely because we're we're anticipating re-strengthening of Irma as it continues to turn over the very warm Florida Straits. I want to talk about the situation here. If we can show you what's happening in Florida. I know we are following down around the Florida Keys, and I don't know if we have that tower cam available, but they've been getting some of the outer bands already in the Florida Keys, in South Florida, off and on squalls through the day today, and this is really just the beginning. Here's a live look, as you can see, and you know what you see in the sky there is actually only going to get worse in the coming next 12 hours as we continue to see off and on squalls in those outer bands of very large Hurricane Irma. You know, continuing to watch the outer band sort of lash South Florida, and we were concerned that that would start happening today as folks try to make any final preparations and final evacuations, even as new evacuation orders get issued as that track of Irma now continues up right along the west coast of Florida. All right, so here's the radar, and you can see, again, where Key West is and where the center of Irma is, and look how far reaching those outer bands are. You know, all the way over towards Miami and Homestead, we're getting some showers as well right now, and certainly even in the northern Bahamas, you're getting tropical storm force conditions with the outer reaches of this large hurricane, which the hurricane itself has tropical storm force conditions that extend out nearly 200 miles in terms of, you know, from center to the outer bands. So we're expecting this to be a far-reaching impact here, even well before we get a landfall at some time tomorrow. Let's talk more about what's happening here across portions of Florida. You know, continuing to see folks evacuate in the Florida Keys, the National Weather Service still putting out messages that it's not too late. If you need to get to a safe shelter, go now before conditions go downhill. In Miami, we've got folks who are ready for Irma. The shelters are certainly very active in the Miami area. We're taking a look at some spots that have been boarded up, even up into Charleston, where I was yesterday. You know, in Charleston, South Carolina, we're not in the cone. Savannah, we're not specifically in the cone, but we'll still feel impacts as winds. You're looking at the forecast for winds here by Monday. With those extreme outer reaches of tropical storm force conditions, winds could get in excess of 50 or 60 miles per hour. And tidal concerns will be a big impact as well, with going through 5 high tide cycles in Charleston and in Savannah and along the coast of southern South Carolina and Georgia. 5 high tide cycles that will cause flooding as well, starting actually by this evening. All right, so watching the radar here, as you can see, the far-reaching extents. Another concern we have, of course, is that with any landfalling tropical system, there will be the threat for tornadoes. So that will be a risk starting today, ramping up even more tomorrow, and ramping up throughout the Florida Peninsula. And the tornado risk actually is there as well into Georgia and South Carolina by the time we get into Monday. All right, so let's take a closer view. There is a tornado warning for Collier County. This includes Golden Gate and parts of Naples. This goes until 10:15 local time. We're watching this little cell, and this is just the beginning of the threats that we will see from Irma. This is a very real concern as we have torcons of 8 from Florida stretching all the way up to 4s through 6s in Georgia and South Carolina. Again, the threat will continue to ramp up as we get through the next 24 hours. As we watch this radar, watch the rotation of the storms and the general movement of the storms. It's not your classic moving from west to east. Look how it's moving from east to west. So be on guard as well as we watch the track of these individual cells on some of the extreme outer bands here of Irma. Okay, continuing to talk about some of the preparations that folks are making. You know, we're watching the radar right now. It is breezy here today, but overall a dry day in southeast Georgia. And I want to talk about the contraflow across South Florida, where contraflow operations have begun on I-16. And they are urging folks who need more information about the evacuation in South Georgia to check in with gema.ga.gov. There was a tweet from the Georgia EMA earlier today, and they have stated that contraflow operations have begun on I-16. So looking at that forecast for this area, today expecting a dry day, and we will expect the brunt of the weather in Savannah on Monday. All right, let's go down to the Tampa area, Hillsborough County, and see what officials are saying right now.
Weather Service, right now, we're seeing that the storm surge threat for us really indicates that we really need to look at level A. Now, for those that don't know, if they're not clear or clearly understand exactly where level A is, that's why we wanted to have the maps for you, and we'll make these available for you. But everyone up against the coastal area here in Hillsborough County, as you're looking on the map, the areas in red here, not the yellow, not the green, not any of the areas. The yellows and red are what we're talking about right now that's mandatory for you to get out. Obviously, if you're in category level B, evacuation zone, and as Mike said, you want to make sure that you're doing everything that you can to be safe, and you need to consider the safety of your family, so do what you need to do to make sure that your family's safe. As we're talking about this evacuation, I want everybody to be clear. We have 16 shelters open, as Mike mentioned. Those shelters are available. Folks are going to those shelters, are taking advantage of it, but not everybody has to go to a shelter. If you don't need to go to a shelter, just get to a safe location. We're not asking you to go hundreds of miles. We're asking you to go tens of miles. As you look at the map, Hillsborough County, the areas that are outside of our evacuation zone are areas where we have shelters set up, and those are areas that are safe. If you have family, if you have friends, if you have those that you can go to and get a hotel room or what have you outside of the surge zone, that's what you need to do. Just make sure that the facility is strong enough to withstand the winds that we're expecting from this storm. So mobile home parks, manufactured homes, that's what we're saying. They can't withstand the wind. They need to evacuate now as well anywhere in the county. So we just wanted to be clear. Another point, we're hearing the question, as Mike mentioned, flood zones. This is the surge zones that we have are from the water driven by the wind from a hurricane that can push on shore. When we're talking about flood zones, we're talking about inland flooding, and those that live in the areas near our rivers, the Little Manatee, the Alafaya. You know that we get a lot of rain and those areas flood. You know that these are known areas for us. We're expecting right now possibly up to 10 to 12 inches of rain with this storm. Again, it's unknown, but you need to plan for that. With that type of spike, you need to be getting to high ground if you live in those areas that are known to flood. Again, we're talking surge zones for the hurricane surge, but also we're talking flood zones. If you know you're in a known flood zone, be prepared to go to higher ground. We want everyone to continue to listen to the messages coming out because this storm is still changing, folks. It's not here yet, and it still could make changes. It could do a lot of different things. We want everybody to be as safe as possible and just continue to stay focused. Mike?
From the fire rescue standpoint, we'll be calling in additional personnel to staff our stations. We're going to stand up technical search and rescue teams throughout the county. These are highly skilled firefighters, fire medics who have additional training. They will go out as soon as the storm passes. So what we'll be doing is calling in additional personnel. We'll be prepared before the storm arrives. There will be a period of time while the storm is over us that we will be unable to respond because of the high wind speeds. You should be aware of that, and the dispatch 911 center will report that to you if you call in. As soon as the storm passes and the wind speeds are safe for us to be out on the roads, we will immediately go out into the communities. These 8 or more technical search teams will be dispersed throughout the county. They will be going out with bulldozers and push crews. There will be TECO line crew with them. There will be additional support so that they can take care of any challenges that we may face, whether it be cutting power lines, removing trees, and getting access to the communities that are the most damaged. We additionally will have, because of the riverine flooding as well as the flooding that will occur due to the storm surge, we are going to have additional aquatic assets, boats, john boats, rigid hull inflatables, inflatable boats dispersed throughout the county with trained rescuers on those as well to handle any of the water issues that might occur. We are definitely, we've been planning for several days specific to this storm. Lived here all my life. This is the worst storm that the state will face. You need to be prepared for it. You need to plan, have a plan for your family. Heed the advice of emergency management and government. Do what we're asking you to do. Go to a shelter, safe shelter, and know that we are prepared once that storm has passed. We are prepared to go out in the community and do everything we can to help those that need the help. Thank you.
Good morning. Senator Darrell Roussan, Senate District 19, portions of Hillsborough and Pinellas counties. The time to be brave is now for our first responders, for our law enforcement, for our firefighters, for the great staff of Hillsborough County. I want to congratulate County Administrator Mike Merrill for what he's done and his entire staff, and the Hillsborough County Commissioner and their chairman for working diligently. The time to be brave is not for our citizens to hunker down, but follow the directions, the instructions of the law enforcement professionals, of the emergency professionals. When they tell you to evacuate, evacuate. Mandatory means mandatory, and particularly to the portions of my district, Apollo Beach and Riverview and Brandon that are in A, please, if you haven't left, please go. Safety is about family. Thank you.
Good morning. I'm Catherine Egan with Harvard.
And you're just listening to a Hillsborough County press conference there. There are new evacuations now ordered for part of that area. I want to remind folks to go to floridadisaster.org, and there are links there specifically where you can go in and put your address in and know what zone you're in then, and know if you are indeed part of that evacuation. I think that's key. And I want to echo something the last speaker said, which is the time to be brave is now. And he was speaking both to first responders and also to citizens. And when it comes to citizens, when it means to be brave in this case, it means to follow the orders of emergency management. If you're under an evacuation order, you need to go. Mandatory means mandatory, and that is key for all of the areas in impact zones from Hurricane Irma. This is a powerful hurricane. It is large, and we know that the destruction will not just happen around that core of the eye, that it will actually happen well removed as we see long-running hurricane force winds, tropical storm force winds that extend out, more than 100 or even close to 200 miles away from the center. And then, of course, tornadoes will be another threat as well. Look at the hurricane warnings. This is not just a coastal event. In entire central and south Florida under a hurricane warning. The hurricane watch extends north of that. And again, it's not just coastal areas. This is an inland threat too. And you can see where the tropical storm watches now have been expanded a bit up into parts of South Georgia. And as we get through the day today, anticipating more of Georgia and perhaps even parts of the South Carolina coast, getting into some of those watch as well. All right, one area that is in this warning is in the Orlando area. So Justin Michaels is standing by there with how folks are preparing. Justin.
Hey, Jen, I'll tell you what, preparations are well underway here in this part of Florida. We can tell you that the Florida Department of Transportation, they've removed all cones and barrels and anything that could be a projectile on the highways, completely taken off, and those highways are clear. It was actually kind of strange going through construction zones and not even seeing a construction barrel today while we traveled from West Palm Beach to here. So what's the timing of this here in Orlando? Well, things start to go downhill tomorrow afternoon, Sunday afternoon, and they're going to see possible winds 35 to 40 mile an hour, tropical storm force winds late afternoon, gusts up to 60. And then as far as the worst, it's overnight Sunday into Monday, where hurricane force winds 90 to 100 miles an hour, sustained winds of about 70 miles an hour, and the probability of localized flooding here in Orlando. Because of all that, I can tell you lots of closures are coming up today. Walt Disney World closes at 9 tonight. Universal Orlando closes at 7. SeaWorld Orlando and also Busch Gardens Tampa close at 5 o'clock tonight. And the Orlando International Airport, it is stopping flights at 5 o'clock tonight. Of course, we do know all public schools, public universities, all of those are closed right now. And a lot of preparations are going into way. We can tell you here in this public park, we've spoken with some public works people. They've removed everything from this park that could be a projectile. And that's what we're finding all over the state of Florida, making sure places are prepared and ready so that nothing can actually hurt somebody. Of course, the Weather Channel will continue live coverage of Hurricane Irma as it's now impacting Florida right after this.
these things sometimes have a little bit of a mind of their own, and for every little jog this way or that way makes all the difference in the world and where it may eventually even wind up. And Carl Parker, you know as well as I do, the longer parts of this stay over water, we know eventually it goes into the northern Gulf and comes on shore, but the longer the wind field could stay up. So for cities like Birmingham, Atlanta, Montgomery, Macon, your wind potential goes up with the longer term that stays offshore. Parker, you know as well as I do.
That's absolutely right, Jim. And so, we've been looking at a model showing the core of the storm, showing it partially onshore and partially offshore, so still drawing energy from very warm water in the Gulf of Mexico. But yes, if the core were to stay a little more offshore, here's the model forecast showing you this RPM model. You see it's right along the coast there. That's Monday morning. If it's farther offshore, then it stays stronger and longer. And as it stands, Jim, we're going to be talking about winds that will be very strong coming up into South Georgia. There we go into Monday afternoon. And in fact, I don't know if you saw this, Jim, but looking at the European model, which, by the way, has done a real bang-up job. This has been the best model of all, hands down, in this event. And when you look at the European model, Jim, we're going to be talking about forecast in North Georgia. It's actually coming up into South Georgia, 70 and 80, Monday after 90 miles per hour. In North Georgia, in the Atlanta metro area. So this could be a formidable storm. We won't see sustained winds anywhere near that event. Where we get some heavier bands of storms with all that strong wind, all that velocity and momentum, along with being transferred down to the ground. And we could be talking about winds that could easily knock down a lot of trees and cause a lot of power outages across much of the state of Georgia and also into South Carolina. Winds anywhere near that event. Where we get some heavier bands of storms with all that
and maybe even worse if that comes to fruition. Carl, here's